It was a quiet afternoon when John finally arrived at his home. His heart beat fast as he walked toward the big gate of the mansion he once built with so much love. Everything looked the same from the outside, but he had no idea what he was about to walk into. As he stepped inside the house, the first thing he heard was the soft sound of a baby fussing and the dragging sound of a mop. He followed the sound quietly, and there, in the middle of the living room, he saw her, his daughter, Mirabelle. She was mopping the floor, with little Celine tied to her back. The baby looked weak, and Mirabelle herself looked pale, thin, and tired. Her dress was old and stained with water. Her hair was rough, and she looked far too mature for her young age. John stood. His chest tightened. He took a step closer and said softly, "Mirabelle." At first, Mirabelle thought she was imagining things. She turned around slowly, and when her eyes met his, the mop fell from her hand. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. John nodded, already crying. "It's me, baby. It's Daddy." Mirabelle screamed and ran into his arms, nearly falling. John hugged her tightly, then gently lifted little Celine from her back and held both of them close. He was shaking. They were crying, but as the joy of the moment calmed a little, John pulled back and looked at them both, shocked by their condition. "Why are you mopping the floor while carrying your sister?" he asked, looking around in disbelief. "Why do you both look so untidy and malnourished? Where's your mom?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Mirabelle's face fell. The joy in her eyes slowly faded. She looked down, tears starting again. "Daddy. Mommy is gone." John felt like the ground beneath him moved. "Gone?" he asked, stunned. "What do you mean gone?" Mirabelle tried her best to explain. She told him everything. How they had received the news of his death in the plane crash, how Mommy couldn't bear the pain and later died during an asthma attack, and how Uncle Matthew and Auntie Agatha moved in and changed everything. She told him how she had been caring for Celine, how they were treated like strangers in their own home, how she was forced to do chores while carrying her baby sister, and how no one cared for them. John sat down, unable to hold back the tears. He hugged his daughters again, his heart shattered. "I'm so sorry," he said over and over. "I didn't die. I was wrongly arrested. I couldn't reach you. I fought every day to come home." And now that he was finally back, John made a silent vow in his heart: he would make everything right. John held his daughters close, but his heart was breaking into pieces. He couldn't stop crying. "My Linda. My love." he sobbed, his voice filled with pain. "Forgive me. If only I didn't fall into that trouble, you'd still be alive. I failed you. I failed our children." He broke down completely, his strong body shaking as months of pain, helplessness, and guilt poured out in tears. Mirabelle held his hand tightly, also crying. Little Celine, too young to understand, just looked at them with innocent eyes. After a while, John wiped his face and stood up. He looked at Mirabelle and said softly, "You've suffered enough, my daughter. You and your sister deserve better." Without wasting time, John rushed into the kitchen. He boiled water, carefully prepared a clean bath for his children, and lovingly gave them a proper wash, just like Linda used to. He washed the dirt from their little bodies, combed Mirabelle's tangled hair gently, and dressed them in the best clean clothes he could find. Then he wrapped them up and took them out. He held Mirabelle's hand tightly while carrying Celine in his other arm, walking straight to a nearby restaurant. He ordered a rich, Warm meal for Mirabelle, not leftovers, but real food. Rice, meat, juice. Something she hadn't tasted in a long time. Then he went to a pharmacy and bought baby milk, cereal, and medicines for Celine. Mirabelle couldn't believe what was happening. As she sat and ate, tears filled her eyes again, but this time, it wasn't from sadness. It was from relief. For the first time in many months, she felt safe. She felt loved. That afternoon, Agatha returned from the salon, her hair newly styled and her nails freshly painted. She stepped into the house expecting to find everything sparkling clean. But instead, the living room was still half-mopped, and Mirabelle was nowhere to be found. Her voice thundered through the house. "Mirabelle," she screamed. "Where is that lazy girl? Why hasn't she finished the chores? She will see what I will do to her today." She paced the room angrily, checking every corner, but the house was silent. By evening, Matthew had returned from the day's business. He dropped his bag and settled into the sitting room. Agatha sat beside him, complaining bitterly about Mirabelle's laziness. Their own children played and laughed, unaware of the storm about to arrive. Just then, the door opened. John walked in slowly, carrying Celine in one arm and holding Mirabelle by the hand. The moment Matthew and Agatha saw him, they froze, their eyes widened in shock. And before they could think, they jumped from the couch in fear, their faces pale. Agatha let out a small scream. Matthew staggered back, almost falling. "John. Is that really you?" Matthew asked. We thought you died in the crash." John didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He looked straight at them and said calmly, "Relax. I'm not a ghost. I'm very much alive." They slowly sat down, still confused and shaken. Then John spoke again, explaining everything. How he was wrongly arrested, how he was stuck for months in a foreign country with no way to contact anyone, and how he fought day and night just to return to his family. And then, he turned to Matthew. His eyes were filled with pain, but his voice was calm. "Matthew," he said quietly. "So this is how you and your wife have been treating my children." Matthew looked down, unable to answer. John continued, "So because you thought I was dead, you took over my house, my business. That was not enough for you to treat them well. And you decided to turn my children into housemates? You let my daughter suffer like a slave while carrying a baby on her back. You made her beg for food in the house her parents built." He looked at Agatha, who sat speechless, biting her lip in shame. "Agatha, my wife treated you like a sister. We opened our home to you. And this is what you gave in return." There was silence. Then John turned back to Matthew and asked the most painful question of all: "If I had truly died, is this how my children would have continued suffering? Would you have watched them waste away, without care, without love, just because they no longer had a voice to speak for them?" Tears gathered in John's eyes again as he held his daughters close. "I may have lost my wife," he said, "but I will never let my children suffer again, not while I'm alive." John stood in the middle of the sitting room, his heart heavy and his eyes fixed on his elder brother. "I did everything for you, Matthew," he said slowly. "I brought you from the village. I gave you a better life. I opened a business for you. I rented a good apartment so your children could have a future in the city. I helped you because you were my only brother, and I wanted to see you grow." Matthew sat with his head bowed, unable to say a word. John's voice rose slightly, the pain in his chest too much to hold in. "But the moment you heard I was dead, and my wife too, You didn't even grieve. You didn't even think of the children we left behind. You withdrew my kids from school, children who love learning. You turned my little daughter into a maid for your wife and kids. She cleaned your house. She begged for food. She cried at night while feeding her baby sister Pete without milk. He paused. Oh, Matthew. I never imagined this, not even in my worst nightmare. That my own blood would betray me this way. Matthew's face was pale. He looked like someone who had just received a death sentence. Agatha sat frozen, unable to lift her head. They never imagined a day like this would come. All their pride, all the power they thought they had, suddenly turned to dust in their hands. John continued, quieter now, but each word hit like thunder. You did all of that because you believed I was truly dead. You never thought a day like this would come. A day I would return from the dead. Tears fell from Mirabelle's eyes as she stood beside her father, holding Celine. She had waited so long for someone to speak for them. Matthew and Agatha couldn't even beg. Their shame was too deep. Their hearts were filled with regret and disappointment, not just in themselves, but in the choices they made out of greed and selfishness. After everything had been said, John looked Matthew in the eyes one last time and said firmly, You have just this night to pack your things and leave my house first thing tomorrow morning. I don't want a single pin that belongs to me or my late wife leaving this house with you. The room went cold. Matthew didn't respond. He simply nodded, shame written all over his face. Agatha didn't dare utter a word. Her proud shoulders were now slumped. The arrogance and loud voice she once had were gone. That night, they sat together in the guest room, broken and confused. The silence between them was heavy. Everything they thought they had was now gone. Where do we go? Agatha asked with tears in her eyes. We have no choice, Matthew replied, holding his head in his hands. We'll have to go back to the village. We left our rented house and even collected balance from the landlord. And I shut down the shop John opened for me. I thought I had made it. Agatha sat on the edge of the bed, her heart beating fast. So it's over? Yes, Matthew answered. It's over. The next morning, with no joy and no dignity, they quietly packed their belongings into old bags. John stayed upstairs with his daughters, refusing to come down. He didn't want to see them off. He had seen enough. Matthew and Agatha walked out the gate with their heads low. No car, no pride, only shame. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't look back. They went straight back to the village, empty-handed, with nothing but the guilt of what they had done. Back in the house, peace slowly returned. John sat in the living room with Mirabelle and little Celine in his arms. This house, he said softly, is yours, my daughters. And no one will ever treat you like strangers in it again.